Hello and welcome to this session on quality renderings using CET. We hope to share with you some creative and technical processes in using CET and a bit of knowledge we've gained as previous participants in the CET Rendering Awards. To start, we'll introduce ourselves first.
So my name is John Anthony Jueves, but you can call me Anton. I am currently the training supervisor at Jueves Philippines Inc. and have been with the company for 8 years now. I started participating in the CET Awards in 2018. My first winning entry, the Orange Kitchen, won second place, and I usually play with lights and colors when rendering as seen in my entries. So we'll discuss these renderings in detail shortly.
Hi, I'm Catherine Cruz. You can call me Kate for short. I've been working as a designer in Studio West Philippines for 6 years. And for those of you who've been using CET back in 2019, you may have seen this rendering during startup. This was my entry for the kitchen category and won the third place that year. And last year I joined again and honored to be the first place in the rendering category. Our topic today is divided into three parts. First is the creative process, wherein I'll share with you a few notes in creating compositions. Second, we'll jump into the CET tools in creating materials and adding lighting. Then we have a few more tips which you can apply to your own projects. So from here, most samples you'll be seeing are winning entries from Studio West Philippines from 2018 to 2023. In creating entries or renderings, we consider composition as a huge part of the output. It's like preparing your canvas before applying paint. Sometimes you can have the best settings, but if the arrangement isn't okay, then it might not work well in the end. Part of composition is balance. Generally, it's making sure your composition isn't too overwhelming and is focused on your main subject. Here, what I did is since I have the solid items on the left side, in contrast, I just did a patterned glass window on the other side. So it's heavy versus light. At the same time, to make the viewer focus more on the kitchen, the angle is lowered and centered on the island, which then connects it to the whole of the kitchen. Another thing you can try to balance is the choice of accessories. Here you'll notice the solid accessories are near to the center, so it instantly directs the viewer's eyes towards the middle or towards the kitchen. Further accessories here are see-through or just frame displays, such as the drop lights and wire vases. These accessories won't grab much attention and at the same time lightens the overall look of your rendering. Another tip is to leave some space empty. So this one is just a personal tip to avoid making your rendering overwhelming or heavy to look at. Another example to balance your rendering in this time, a one-point perspective is to have a plain or lightly textured wall between two patterned or heavy sides. This way, we can see the sunlight and shadows better once they're casted towards that area. Again, I angled the perspective in a way that it shows the focal point, and in this case, I wanted to highlight more on the tables and chairs. Another tip from this rendering is the use of lighting to direct your viewer to the focal point. So although I do have the solid or heavy items near the viewer, these parts became a bit low-key compared to the middle area with light, shadows, and metal chairs. Fun fact, the chairs are called batibot, which is a traditional Filipino chair popular in the Philippines during the 1950s. Using unique pieces can also play a part on your overall compositions. The two factors I've somehow mentioned under composition are materials and lighting. In general, your choice of materials, the balance between these descriptions, are important in your composition. With lighting, it plays a key role in making your rendering realistic and also sets the mood of your space. Later, I'll do a short demo of a simple process you can follow in creating compositions. Now, in creating and editing materials, there are different settings to adjust in order to achieve certain features. But don't worry, a lot of finishes, including PBR materials, are readily available in our Material Explorer. In the Material Explorer, you can access the Material Lab, which is a built-in tool in editing and creating materials. For faster material editing, you can also use the Select Material window, although settings here are limited to diffuse, specular, reflection, sharpness, and scale. From here, you can play with the material options, or you can start your own from an image or color. Afterwards, you can change their properties starting with reflection. With reflection, you can control how much environment is reflected on the material. Meanwhile, the setting below reflection is sharpness. This one determines the sharpness of material reflected. Moving the slider to the right will increase sharpness, like in the mirror and floor finish in this rendering by Riza in 2018. Moving the slider to the left reduces reflection and will make the material less smooth or matte, like in the cabinet finish. You can explore these settings if you'd like to achieve certain materials like brushed metal. Remember that if you want to use a material that is very reflective, you should compensate by making the primary color of the material darker, otherwise the material will look too bright or too light. Fresnel is another feature where reflection is based on the viewed angle. This makes renderings more believable since in reality, reflection differs from where you're viewing. In this example, notice that the reflective material is more visible when viewed on a lower angle, but when viewed on a higher angle, the material has less light reflected, so there's less reflection on the surface. This is the same as doing photography at this angle compared to just shooting it at an angle above the water, where light and reflection would be seen differently. Next is bump. This setting helps create non-flat and detailed surfaces such as grooves and scratches. It also adds in an illusion of depth, which catch the light as if they are represented by real geometry. A good example for bumps are brick surfaces, which you can see here in Nadi's entry last year. She used it as a backwall texture, which was then highlighted by the light coming from the windows. Under bump, there's a term called normal maps. These control the point on the surface to be raised. White pixels will appear raised, while dark ones will appear deeper. So where can we get normal maps? Easiest is to search Google for texture and upload it in the Materials Lab. So let's say I want to apply this texture from Google. First, you have to save it on your device. Afterwards, open your Material Explorer and click on the Material Lab. After the pop-up window appears, look for the primary color section and tick the box for texture. And then after this, add an image of the color you prefer. So here I applied a beige color as an example. Next step is to scroll down the material properties and look for bump. Here you will upload the texture image we saved earlier. Then you can adjust properties like the amount of bump, the size of the image, and even rotate it if you'd like. And then you can now apply it on the object and have it rendered. So that's how we apply bumps. Besides creating materials from scratch, there are available PBRs in CET. These already have properties to simulate materials. You can check it in the Material Explorer by ticking the box to show only PBR materials. Also last year, Anton attended the Advanced CET 5-day course by Configura Academy. You can check it out in the Configura website if you're interested. Because in this course, courtesy of Lindsay, we learned that we can access more PBRs through a website called ambientcg.com. Here you can download complete files to import into the Material Lab, just like this paving stone material. Just a quick tutorial for applying files from ambientcg.com. First, you have to click Convert to PBR in the Material Properties. Then click on the base color and import the underscore color file in the zip folder downloaded. There will be a prompt asking to associate textures, so just click yes, and all the other files will be added to the properties. You can still adjust the scale and other aspects if you prefer. Another website we discovered from the Configura course is this website where you can create normal maps from an image. Same procedure after adding an image in the drag and drop area. Download the maps and upload in the Materials Lab.
Lastly, for materials, remember to scale textures or patterns according to the object or according to the wall or flooring, just like what Carl did here in his entry back in 2020. He adjusted the wall and chair patterns to match with the overall look. From here, you can explore more settings and play around the materials lab. Remember that if you really want to achieve a certain material, you need to set aside time since this can be a trial and error practice. So those are the most common settings we adjust for materials, and I'm sure there's still a lot to discover in CET. For lighting, I'll give the floor to Anton.
Thanks, Kate. Now let's proceed to lighting. Lighting creates the overall mood and atmosphere of the space. It's important to set this one right since everything else may or may not be seen depending on your lighting. There's a lot of lightings found in CET, but we'll focus on just a few you can utilize quickly in your renderings. So first is omni light. Project lights in all directions and useful to make certain areas naturally visible. Since this is an all-around lighting source, omni-light symbol appears like a ball of light in CET. You can adjust the size, intensity, and temperature as you like. In my entry for the CET Awards 2019, I placed an omni-light in a floor lamp in the corner to create a burst of light which casts shadows behind the screen for a dramatic effect. Next is area lights. This projects light downwards and is an easy option for overall general lighting. It creates soft and evenly spread illumination throughout the space. Since it's a downward lighting source, it appears as a flat, square, or rectangle depending on how you'd place it. Some use it as an overall lighting by drying it above an area like a huge box, but generally it's a great option for downlight, spin lights, or lamps without casting any shadow above, like in the lamps here in our colleague Grace's entry in CT Awards 2020. Besides area light, a quick option to add overall lighting is the fluorescent ceiling. Here you can customize an equally distributed lighting, which can either have a tile or can lighting. Here you can adjust details for row and column spacing, tile size, and so on to achieve your preferred ceiling. The example here shows can lighting with two spaces between each row and column. For brightness and temperature, you can click on the light setting just like in Omni and area lighting. Beside the icon for fluorescent ceiling is the light wire grid. This one creates a set of ceiling lights, however, without the solid ceiling itself. Here you can choose more types of lighting such as the industrial light, dome light, and many more types of drop lights. We tried using it in the same example for comparison just to show how this option may need higher walls and a separate ceiling symbol. Then placing ceiling lights really depends on the area you would like to show. For conference rooms like this with visible ceiling in the rendering, we definitely recommend the fluorescent ceiling. If you're rendering a bigger area, most likely the light wire grid would work. Meanwhile, if your rendering doesn't show the ceiling and you just want an added lighting effect, the area light would be a quicker option. Next is window lights. This one allows lights to come off from a window. This selection is found under the 3D tab. After clicking the icon, you can add it in your windows, but note that it follows the window direction to where the light will be coming from. Using window lights is another option to give a natural light effect in your rendering. Remember that lighting temperature should be considered when omni or area lights are added to the space. The color temperature is generally the basis of the mood of your rendering. In CET, temperature can be set from 15 to 75, with 35 as the normal office light. Again, as the basis of the mood, lighting can bring different feelings to your rendering. The warmer the temperature, the cozier and friendlier the feeling is, like in home, restaurants, or hotel rooms. Neutral temperature provides an inviting space such as in reception areas and offices. And cooler temperature gives a bright and clean look, so it's recommended for classrooms and hospitals. Here you'll see in this home setting, as seen in my kitchen rendering entry in 2018, I use a warm glow of lights to create a soft, inviting atmosphere. The rendering aims to bring out the calm mood of nearing sunset when you just want to call it a day and relax in the comforting effect of warm, soft light. As compared to an office setup in this entry by Risa in 2018, it creates a brighter and more alert environment with the use of cooler lights. It makes the space look efficient as a workspace. Another option for lighting is using sunlight from the Photolab settings under lighting and shadows. With this tool, you can adjust sun direction, pitch, and intensity. This requires a bit more time to adjust to your liking, but once set up, it can create realistic renders, just like here in Abigail's entry last year, where the sunlight added shadows and texture to the overall rendering. And one good thing about this setting is you can click preview shadows so you can see where the sunlight will be directed. And when cast towards objects like trees or window jalousies, it can create a play of shadows, like in Kate's entry last year. So just to recap, omni lights, area lights, window lights, and sunlight are just a few lighting in City you can utilize. These are quick options that we've applied to our entries to create quality renderings. There are still a lot to explore and possibly mix to achieve certain renderings and effects. And we have more tips to share. Default CET settings already work great once you've set up everything else. You can explore and tweak parts of it if you'd like. We typically adjust the image dimension and color setup. Another tip is to direct light into textured material so it will highlight textures, geometry, surfaces, and maybe cast shadows for an added effect. Here is an example by Carla for the CET Awards in 2021. She maximized the shadows and textures, especially in the fabric accessory by the window. Next, when doing outdoor window view, it should connect with your interior. Color should be of the same tone with the color temperature of your lighting. This one will create a more consistent rendering for presentation, like in this entry by Grace in 2019. Since her interiors are mostly neutral, her outdoor view didn't have overpowering colors. Also, aim for neutral tones since high saturated colors tend to look cartoonish. And speaking of outdoor window view, you can access different panorama backgrounds from polyhaven.com and have it imported in CET. I also learned this from the Configura Advanced CET course mentioned earlier. From this website, make sure to download the EXR file, then when importing, change file type to OpenEXR for the file to appear. Sometimes though, panorama views would take a while to adjust since we only have scale and offset to move the view around. Also, some panoramic views may appear pixelated, which does not match with the high-resolution rendering. Notice here that the trees outside are a bit off compared to the interiors. So as an alternative, you can use an image file to make your background clearer. Make sure to adjust the image elevation and position so it fits your perspective view. One good example of using image as a background is this rendering by Carl in 2019. He elevated the image so the sunset is slightly centered onto the horizon. So how do we apply images directly as background? One method is first, import the background image to materials. Afterwards, choose your saved file. Then third, click use and then apply on the wall outside the window where it can be seen. Another way is to click and drag the image file to your 3D view, then click edit on the green properties tab. Remove the frame and from here, you can adjust the size of the image to your liking. Just a quick tip, if you'd like to brighten an image without editing and adding back the image file, you can add an area light above instead. Also, utilize accessories to make it look natural. Try to rotate a chair, add small trinkets and different plants to create a lively space. You could even be as playful as dividing one space into two color schemes, just like I did in my entry for the CET Awards 2021, which won second place. And just a friendly reminder, rendering is a trial and error practice. Keep testing and experimenting, but always remember to have fun.
Just to wrap things up, I'll be showing a simple process you can follow in creating compositions, adding materials, as well as lighting. Remember that there's no one way process for this, but I hope this guides you for future projects. First, define your space using walls and decide on the perspective or viewpoint. Here I wanted a high ceiling, a huge window, and just a small space so it's easier to work on. From here, I decided I wanted an angle to show more of the window side. So what I needed next is to add a window which I got from 3D Warehouse. Then I added some columns here so the corners won't be too plain. After this, we can start adding materials for the architectural elements. I mostly just used what we already have in the Material Explorer and just adjusted properties like the scale as well as the reflection. But again, you can always download PBRs and insert images for your preferred patterns. For the wall, I wanted something that looks smooth and has its own texture, so I opted for a stone finish. Since this one is smooth, I made the other side contrasting using wood slats created from the box symbol here in CET. In reality, wood slats are installed almost side by side, but since my angle is like this, needed to add gaps for it to look defined from this angle. Once you're happy with the architectural elements, you can now jump to furnishing. I mentioned earlier that I used a local Filipino chair as a unique piece. So to make everything consistent, I decided to use another item that has a local material like rattan weaving or what we call solihia. So solihia looks something like this. Also, since this is my preferred angle, I moved things around so they won't overlap in the final rendering. In adding accessories, I still look for items with local elements, just like the tropical plants, the weaved pot, and this lamp, which also had a solihia pattern. Then I added more trinkets, a rug, the laptops, another vase, patterns, and a wall decor. I also added in a drop lighting which doesn't have a solid shell. As I mentioned earlier, see-through items look lighter for the rendering. Remember also to apply the right materials for your furnishings and accessories, as this will enhance your rendering. With lighting, I added omni lights for the drop light and lamp, and although they weren't seen much in the final rendering, I still left it as is just to give a faint kind of brightness in the item. Then I used sunlight to give a warmer feel to the space. Here you can preview where the light will land inside the room. And since I wanted to further highlight the collab area, I angled the light towards it. However, I thought the sunlight seemed too solid, so to create some texture, I added in trees outside so it'll cast some shadows. You can add a panorama background or image if you like, but if you're happy with how it is, like in this case, just having greeneries outside the window, then you can leave it as is. You can also adjust other settings here in the post processing, and once everything's okay, you can now save your rendering. So that's a quick step-by-step process. In reality, this takes a lot of time, so just enjoy the process and have fun. That's it. We hope we're able to share with you something new for your renderings and maybe for your future entries in the Configura Awards. This has been Anton and Kate from Studio West Philippines. Thanks for listening.